Step out of the vehicle. This isn't your car." The officer's voice cut through the night like a blade. Blue and red lights flashed against the slick red paint of the Ferrari park, just outside the gated entrance of Oakmont Estates. The engine still paraded a low, expensive growl that drew stares from every passing driver. But none of them were expecting to see a black man behind the wheel. He didn't move right away. He just sat there, hands calmly on the wheel. Dark eyes locked on the reflection of two approaching officers in the rearview mirror. One of them already had a hand resting on his holster. The second officer stepped closer. "Sir, I'm not going to ask again." From the sidewalk, a woman slowed her jog, earbuds dangling. A man across the street pulled out his phone. The Ferrari had attracted attention. But now it was something else. A confrontation. A spectacle. And the man behind the wheel, well, he didn't look rattled, not yet, but his grip on the wheel tightened slightly. He'd been here before. Different places. Same questions, same suspicion. He lowered the window. "I live here," he said, voice even, deliberate. "Would you like to see my ID?" The first officer snorted. "People say that all the time. Step out." The second officer looked over. "A Ferrari like this, at this hour, you fit the description." The man's jaw clenched. He didn't ask what description. He already knew. "You ever feel your dignity tested before you've even spoken a word?" He slowly reached into the side compartment and pulled out his license and key card for Oakmont Estate's name printed in gold, clear and official. They didn't even look. Behind them, more phones came out. Someone whispered, "This is getting bad." But the man in the Ferrari, he stayed still, waiting, calculating. There was power in silence, but also a price. And somewhere, deep down, a familiar ache returned, the kind that said, "No matter what I build, they still don't see me." But what happened next? That was when everything changed. Because the moment he finally spoke, people started filming for real. Have you ever been wrongly judged just by showing up somewhere? Or felt your success wasn't enough to protect you from suspicion? Drop just one word in the comments if this hits something real. And keep watching, because next, I'll show you what he pulled from his wallet and why the moment flipped the entire scene on its head. He held out the key card and license again. This time, the light from a bystander's phone hit the card just right. The name printed in elegant serif font caught someone's eye. But the officer closest to him didn't care. He stepped back and unclipped the radio from his shoulder. "Yeah, we've got a suspicious vehicle at the east gate. Black male, mid-30s. Claims he lives here. Requesting backup." The word suspicious stung more than he let on. From the sidewalk, someone gasped. A woman whispered, "He literally offered his ID." What more do they want? Still, no movement from the man in the Ferrari. His hands rested once again on the wheel, his breath steady, but his pulse racing. Not from fear, but from rage buried so deep, it had learned how to sit quietly. The second officer leaned in, peering through the window. "You mind stepping out? We'll make this quick if you cooperate." He looked up, not pleading, not begging, just still. "Would you have asked the same?" he said, "if I were white?" That landed like a slap. The officer flinched, just slightly. But before he could respond, a teen from across the street shouted, "I'm live right now. 50,000 watching. Don't touch him." Phones weren't just out now. They were locked on. And suddenly, the power started to shift just a little. But it wasn't over. The first cop stepped forward again. He didn't yell. He didn't curse. He simply opened the passenger door, uninvited. The CEO's gaze dropped to the handle, then rose back to the man's face. "You're opening my car without consent," he said, voice low but clear. "You do realize that's being recorded, right?" The officer paused. His hand froze on the door. Tension hung in the air, thick, electric, trembling. And yet, behind the calm, the CEO's thoughts were spiraling. Do I raise my voice and give them the excuse they want? Or do I wait, again, for the weight of proof to save me? But this time, he was tired of waiting. He reached slowly to the center console, From a hidden compartment, he pulled out something small, simple, glossy, a business card, thick, matte black, embossed in platinum foil. He held it up with 2 fingers, just enough for the cameras to zoom in. The name, Darnell James, founder and CEO, Velocity Capital. And that changed everything. You ever had to carry your entire resume just to be treated with basic respect? Or watch someone question your right to exist until a title made them rethink? Let me ask you honestly, do you think they would have opened that door if it were a white man in that Ferrari? Drop a 1 if you've seen this happen before, or a 0 if you're not sure what to believe anymore. But stick around because next, I'll tell you what one officer whispered under his breath when he finally read the name. And that moment, that was when the crowd turned. The officer's hand dropped from the car door like it had burned him. His eyes scanned the card again just to be sure. Velocity Capital. The second officer leaned in, reading over his partner's shoulder, his brow furrowed, and his voice dropped low, meant for no one but the man beside him. That's Darnell James, the hedge fund guy. Too late, the camera phones caught the words. They always do. And in a ripple that passed faster than sound, the mood shifted. First, a hush, then whispers, then gasps. He owns half this block, someone muttered. Wait, isn't he the one that backed Tesla's private equity move? Another. Bro, I follow him on LinkedIn. The cop holding the card cleared his throat. Sir, we apologize. There was a misunderstanding. But Darnell didn't answer. He just watched them, silent, the way a man does when apologies arrive decades too late. You ever been offered an apology only after you revealed your title? Is that even an apology or just fear in disguise? Behind him, the crowd grew louder. Some laughed, some cursed under their breath. But not Darnell. His silence had weight. His silence was deliberate. The first officer looked around, then tried to recover. We have to verify. It's protocol. Darnell raised an eyebrow. Protocol, he repeated, slow and sharp. Would have asked for my license first, not backup. Not a hand on your gun. No shouting, no rage, just precision and control. The officer stepped back. A woman in a business suit stepped forward from the sidewalk. Mr. James, I'm sorry. I live in the next complex. He saw the whole thing. Would you like me to give a statement? Darnell turned to her, nodded once, then finally spoke, not to the officers, but to the phones. This isn't about me. It's about what happens when black success meets white suspicion. And the crowd, they weren't just watching anymore. They were listening, because now it wasn't a traffic stop. It was a mirror. But if you think this was the first time he'd been judged in silence, you need to know where he came from, because what gave him the strength to sit still under blue lights wasn't power. It was memory. Ever carried the pain of being doubted so often you started to doubt yourself? In the next part, I'll show you where Darnell James learned silence and what it cost him. It's not the Ferrari that made him dangerous. It's what he survived before owning it. Tell me this. Have you ever felt like silence was your only defense? Drop a quick word below. And if you've ever held back just to stay safe, you're not alone. Before I tell you what he revealed in front of the entire crowd, I know you might be busy. Maybe your phone's at 2%. Maybe someone's calling. But if stories like this speak to you about dignity, prejudice, and quiet power, hit subscribe. You don't want to miss what happened when the media got involved. Now let me take you back. Before the Ferrari, before the platinum business cards, before Velocity Capital, there was Darnell James, a 12-year-old boy standing alone on the front steps of Marlow Middle School. It was raining that morning. Hard. He was soaked through, shirt clinging to his chest, shoes squeaking with every step. He had stayed late for the science fair, built a homemade wind turbine out of soda cans and copper wire. His teacher told him it was exceptional. But when it came time for judging, the prize went to a student whose father donated to the school board. And Darnell, his project was missing when the judges arrived. Later, they said it was misplaced. But he saw it, shoved under a table in the corner. No apology, no explanation. Just the principal's hand on his shoulder, saying, Maybe next time. Darnell. That's when he learned something. Success doesn't protect you unless the world wants you to win. So he stopped waiting for permission. He stopped explaining himself. He started watching, calculating, listening for the quiet rules they never wrote down. And he got good at it. High school, top of his class. College, full ride. Finance major. Internship denied. Twice, same firm, same suit, different name on the resume. But he kept going. And every time someone assumed he didn't belong, he took mental notes. Every rejection, fuel. Every insult, blueprint. That's why, when those cops looked at him with suspicion instead of respect, he didn't panic. He didn't shout. He did what he'd always done. He waited for the moment they realized who he was. But not out of ego, out of exhaustion. Because when you've spent your whole life trying to prove your worth, sometimes silence is the last piece of dignity you can hold on to. You ever felt that? Like you were performing just to be taken seriously? Have you ever had to over-prepare just so you wouldn't be treated like a threat? Drop one word if you've lived that feeling. Because next Darnell doesn't just speak. He walks, and where he goes, shakes the entire city. A black SUV pulled up. No lights, no sirens, just tinted windows and quiet menace. Out stepped a man in a crisp uniform, gold bars on his shoulders, gray at the temples. Lieutenant Parks. He didn't look at the crowd, didn't acknowledge the phones, just walked straight up to Darnell's window. "Mr. James," he said, low but firm, "may I speak with you privately?" Darnell glanced at the surrounding phones. "Anything you say," he replied, "can be heard here." A flicker of annoyance crossed the lieutenant's face. "This situation's escalating. We'd like to resolve it quickly without further noise." Without noise? That's what they always want, right? Quiet discretion, no headlines, no accountability. Darnell stepped out of the car slow, smooth, precise, not because he was told, but because he chose to. He stood tall, suit immaculate despite the night. Around him, the phones kept rolling. Parks leaned in slightly. "Look, we both know what this looks like. Let's not make it harder than it needs to be." Darnell tilted his head. "Harder for who?" Parks exhaled. "You have every right to be upset. But if this goes viral, it becomes political. And once it's political, nobody wins." Darnell chuckled, but it wasn't a warm sound. "No," he said. "You mean you don't win?" The lieutenant shifted. "What are you looking for? An apology? A statement?" Darnell didn't answer right away. He looked around at the crowded, the faces holding phones, at the silent fury in their eyes, at the weight of a moment too familiar. "I'm not looking for words," he said. "I'm looking for change." Parks tried again. "We could issue a press note. You could speak tomorrow. Local channel. We'll frame it, right? Frame it." Even now, they wanted to shape the narrative, smooth the edges, paint over the cracks. But this time, Darnell didn't want smooth. He wanted the crack to show. He wanted the world to see what it looks like when black excellence is still treated as threat. You ever felt like someone offered you silence disguised as justice? Ever been handed a solution that only protected the ones in charge? Because that's what this was. A cleanup, not a correction. And Darnell, he'd had enough of cleanup. So he gave Parks a look so sharp it sliced through the air. "Lieutenant," he said, "I'm not going on local news." Then he turned to the crowd, voice rising just enough to carry. "I'll be speaking at the Chamber of Commerce Press Hall, noon, tomorrow." That's when the phones really started filming again. And the lieutenant? He just not defeated, but still trying to contain the fire. But it was too late, because Darnell James wasn't just protecting himself anymore. He was about to take this public. You ever had a moment where you knew staying quiet would haunt you forever? Let me tell you what happened next when Darnell walked into the press hall and said exactly what no one expected. The Chamber of Commerce Press Hall wasn't built for moments like this. It was meant for ribbon cuttings, business awards, corporate announcements cushioned in champagne and empty applause. But that day, it felt like a courtroom. The kind where truth doesn't just equate detonates. Rows of suited professionals filled the seats, Media crews swarmed the back. Microphones lined the podium like rifles. Some were there for gossip, some for damage control. A few were just curious. And then he walked in. Darnell James. No entourage, no notes, no smile. Just presence. He wore a charcoal gray suit, no tie. Rolex tucked under the cuff. Crisp, calculated, composed. But his eyes, they held something ancient. Not just anger, not just pain. Something deeper. History. He stepped to the mic, adjusted it once. No need to clear his throat. When you've waited your whole life to be hard, you don't waste a second. Yesterday, he began. I was stopped for driving my own car. No flourish, no drama, just the weight of truth. And for some, that would have been the end of the story. Cameras clicked. But for people who look like me, that's usually just the beginning. He let the silence settle. Let it throb. Then he told them everything. The stop, the demands, the refusal to check ID, the attempt to open his car door. No exaggeration, no name-calling. Just facts delivered with the cold precision of someone who's had to repeat them too many times. To cry anymore. You ask what I want. He continued. I don't want apologies. I don't want improved training. I want accountability that doesn't wait for fame to intervene. Somewhere in the back, a reporter scribbled faster. Someone else just put down their pen. Darnell's voice tightened, not louder, but closer. I wasn't the first. I won't be the last. But I'll be damned if I let my silence help them next time. You ever heard someone speak and felt the room freeze? Not because of what was said, but because you realized you'd never forget it. That's what happened there. Executives shifted in their chairs. City officials avoided eye contact. But others, young black professionals in the crowd, sat up straighter. And somewhere in the middle, a woman wiped a tear. Quiet, quick, like she didn't want the moment to see her. Darnell paused, then said one last thing. If power only protects the loudest names, then maybe it's time the quiet ones speak louder. And with that, he stepped away from the mic. But what no one realized not yet was that Darnell hadn't just spoken as a victim. He had spoken as something else. And what he did next, well, that's when the real power play began. Because just one floor above the press hall, a meeting was waiting. And it wasn't just press he was about to face. It was the system itself. Stick around, next I'll show you who really asked to see him after that speech. And trust me, you won't believe who walked into the room. Just one floor above the press hall, behind a set of frosted glass doors, the real meeting began. 3 men in navy suits waited around a long mahogany table. City Commissioner Greg Hall, Police Chief Brenda Knox, and Harold Kinzaith, president of the chamber itself. All white, all stiff. They didn't stand when Darnell entered, but they did glance at each other. Mr. James, Hall began, voice rehearsed. We appreciate you agreeing to speak off record. Darnell didn't respond. He just sat. Knox cleared her throat. Your statement downstairs was powerful, but also very public. There's concern about how the narrative is evolving. There it is again, Darnell thought, the narrative. The word they use when they care more about headlines than harm. Harold Kinsey leaned forward. We'd like to work with you. Maybe coordinate a statement. Build bridges. Darnell's eyes didn't blink. I'm not here to build bridges. They paused. Well then, Hall said carefully. What are you here for? Darnell reached into his briefcase, pulled out a single folder, thick, heavy. He slid it across the table. Chief Knox opened it. Inside, a portfolio, financial holdings, investment records, ownership stakes, multiple, the chamber, the police pension board, 3 real estate projects tied to city contracts, all bearing the same mark, Velocity Capital. Darnell said it plain. I'm not just the man who gave the speech. I'm one of your largest private investors. The room went still. Kinsey's face tightened. This isn't public knowledge. It wasn't meant to be, Darnell said, until you treated me like a suspect instead of a stakeholder. Commissioner Hall swallowed. What do you want? Darnell stood, buttoning his suit. What I've always wanted. Policy, oversight, real reform. And if I don't get it publicly, and immediately firm walks. Not quietly, not politely, but loudly. In court, on record. He stepped to the door, then turned back, one hand resting lightly on the handle. "Oh, hand, just so we're clear. I'm not looking for a seat at your table anymore. I own part of the table." And with that he left. No handshake, no smile, no negotiation. Because Darnell wasn't just surviving the system. He was leveraging it. But of course the system doesn't like to be outmaneuvered. And while Darnell walked out the door feeling the shift in power, somewhere in that room retaliation was already brewing. You ever dared to challenge a machine built to bury people like you? Because in the next part, I'll show you what happens when the system pushes back. And this time, they weren't subtle. It started subtle. A news anchor on a morning show asked, "Should wealthy figures use their influence to pressure city policy?" Another headline appeared online. Who really is Darnell James? A look behind the suit. Anonymous sources hinted at aggressive boardroom tactics. Old college roommates were suddenly asked for quotes. And then came the audit. Unannounced. Conducted by city-appointed examiners. Official reason? Routine compliance. But Darnell had seen that playbook before. When systems can't silence your words, they try to stain your name. One of his assistants came into his office, face pale. "We just lost the Milton account." Milton Pharmaceuticals, a $12 million client. No explanation, just a quiet withdrawal. Within 48 hours, 2 more followed. It wasn't random, it was strategy. Pressure, isolation, leaks. Even his mother called. "Baby, what's going on? They've got your face on the news every hour." He didn't answer her right away, because in truth, he was calculating, but not retreating, because Darnell hadn't spent 20 years building an empire just to beg it to stand. He sat alone in his office that night, city skyline glowing through floor-to-ceiling windows. He poured himself 1 glass of scotch, didn't sip it, just held it, watched the amber light shift in the glass. "They want me scared," he thought. "They want me quiet, but they don't know this isn't even my final card." Then he pulled out a different folder. This one wasn't financial. It was legal. Inside, documented incidents, complaints, emails, testimonies. Not about him, about them. A list of officers with patterns. A map of conflicts of interest inside the chamber. And a contract tone that tied a former board member to an unlawful real estate acquisition. Using city funds. He closed the folder and called his attorney. "It's Tom." "Time for what?" she asked. "For the truth," he said, "and a press conference no one's expecting." Because Darnell didn't just know where the bodies were buried. He had the blueprints of who built the graveyard. You ever been pushed so far the only way forward is to set the whole board on fire? Then you'll want to see what Darnell said in live television when he dropped that folder. Because that moment, that's when the real storm hit. The invitation read, "Press briefing 10 a.m. James Foundation Atrium. TOPIC, Public Safety and Economic Ethics." No one knew what that meant, but by 9:45, the hall was full. Reporters, investors, activists, lawyers, even city officials showed up quietly. In the back, no podium this time, just a long table, a single microphone, and a stack of sealed folders neatly arranged. Darnell stepped forward, no tie again, sleeves rolled slightly. He looked calm, not triumphant, not furious, just ready. "I wasn't planning to hold this event," he began, "but since some parties have chosen to rewrite the story." He tapped the folder. "I thought we'd share the original manuscript." Then he opened it, and the room leaned in. Slide by slide, he laid it out. Internal complaints filed and buried by the same department that stopped him. A pattern of stops targeting minority-owned vehicles near high-end neighborhoods. City contracts funneled to shell corporations connected to chamber board members. Emails reel, timestamp suggesting suppressing optics around controversial police actions. No yelling, no accusations, just evidence. Broadcasted live. By the third folder, the crowd wasn't scribbling. They were recording every word. By the fifth folder, a senior reporter from Channel 9 stood up. "Mr. James, do you have evidence that these decisions were coordinated?" Darnell nodded once, then dropped one final document on the table. A memo, signed from the Chamber's Crisis Committee, contained the narrative, leverage audit threats, isolate financial exposure. The room went still. You know the sound of reputation collapsing? It doesn't roar, it sinks. Darnell looked out over the crowd, not gloating, just present, like a man who had simply held back long enough. "They called me aggressive," he said. "All I did was speak. They tried to audit me, lead me, smear me. But I don't answer to fear. I answer to facts. And if anyone still wants to question who I am," he lifted one final card. Not black this time, white, simple. James Foundation Civil Accountability Task Force. "I won't just fund change," he said. "I'll enforce it. And this city, it just became my first client." He walked off without another word. The reporters didn't chase him. The officials didn't speak. But the phones, still rolling. You ever watch a system pretend to be invincible until someone hands it a mirror? Because after this press conference, the mirror shattered, and the cleanup was just beginning. Next, I'll show you how the city responded. Because when power shifts that fast, the old guard doesn't go quietly. Within 24 hours of the press conference, the city caught fire. Not literally, but something close. The mayor issued a vague statement: "We take these concerns seriously and are reviewing the materials provided." Translation: delay, deny, distract. Several council members called for further investigation, not into the documents, but into Darnell himself. Is he attempting to politicize law enforcement? Should someone with his financial reach also hold public influence? They didn't say the word, but everyone heard it. Too powerful. Online, it was war. Darnell James trended. Some called him a hero, a necessary disruptor. Others accused him of weaponizing privilege and endangering civic trust. Opinion pieces flooded in from both sides. Meanwhile, an anonymous city employee leaked more emails confirming Darnell's documents were real. But the system wasn't done fighting. A retired police union chief went on local TV, claiming Darnell had manufactured outrage for personal gain. Another city partner tried to freeze part of his foundation's assets, claiming misuse of nonprofit status. The message was clear: if you rattle the cage bites back. But Darnell, he didn't flinch. He didn't tweet, didn't argue. He worked quietly, behind closed doors, because he knew something they didn't. Systems collapse fastest when they try to hold themselves up with lies. He made calls, met with 3 minority-owned firms blocked from bidding on city contracts, offered them legal support backed by his own task force. He started quietly interviewing candidates, activists, reformers, policy writers. And he made one move that changed everything. He bought a building, downtown, 3 stories, corner lot, formerly owned by a consultant group that had funneled lobbying money into the chamber. He didn't gut it. He rebranded it the Accountability Center, a place for training, reporting, and policy shaping, built not just for justice but for memory. Because Darnell understood, you can't fix a system by begging for space inside it. You have to build your own walls, and then let the people in. You ever seen someone lose every powerful ally, but somehow come out stronger? That's what Darnell was doing. But the old guard wasn't finished. Not yet. Because what they tried next wasn't political, it was personal. And in part 11, I'll show you how they came for the one thing he couldn't replace, and why that nearly broke him. They couldn't bankrupt him. They couldn't bury him in bureaucracy. So they went after something else. His mother. Her name was Charlene James, retired school teacher, church pianist, known for her sweet tea and her stubborn heart. One morning, she opened her front door in Eastfield Heights and leaped to find 2 men in plain clothes flashing badges. "Mrs. James, we're conducting a welfare review. We'd like to ask you some questions." She led them in, because polite people were raised that way. They sat in her living room, asked about Darnell's finances, his childhood, his political views. Then they hinted she might lose her benefits if something was found. Found where? They didn't say. But they left behind fear, She called Darnell that evening, voice shaking. "Baby, did I do something wrong?" And that broke him more than any audit ever could. Because power doesn't just attack your empire. It slips through the cracks and tries to poison the roots. He didn't raise his voice, didn't storm City Hall. He did something quieter and stronger. He showed up the next day at his mother's door, not with bodyguards, with a camera crew and a lawyer. They filmed everything, the questions she'd been asked, the documents they left, and her voice strong now, not shaking, saying, "I taught my son how to face bullies." Then he posted it, unedited, no hashtags, no outrage, just truth. And it spread, not like fire, like water, steady, deep everywhere. People recognized it, the quiet woman, the overreach, the pattern. Because when corruption comes for someone's mama, the public pays attention. And that clip, it didn't just go viral. It sparked marches. Old women held up signs reading, "I am Shirlene." Veteran teachers posted photos. "She taught my niece. She's one of us." Suddenly, Darnell wasn't just a CEO. He was family. And the system? They made a mistake. Because you can slander a man, you can lie about his motives. But when you mess with a woman who gave 30 years to underfunded schools, you lose the room. You ever seen truth weaponized with grace? That's what Shirlene did. And Darnell? He remembered something she once told him long ago. "Don't raise your voice. Baby'd raise your power." Now, it was time to close the loop. And in part 12, he does. But not just with policy, with legacy. The final vote passed 6-1. New city policy. Mandatory ID checks before any traffic escalation. Full body cams on before an officer can approach a civilian vehicle. An independent review board for police conduct funded not by taxpayers, but by a private trust seeded from Darnell's own foundation. And just like that, the system blinked. It didn't collapse, didn't apologize, but it shifted. Because change doesn't always arrive like thunder. Sometimes it slips in through the seams. Quiet, permanent. 2 weeks later, Darnell stood outside the newly opened Accountability Center. The sign was simple, no gold, no chrome, just black letters on warm oak. Next to him stood his mother. Shirlene wore her best hat, ivory, with a small tilt. A reporter asked her, "How does it feel to see all this?" She smiled. "I was proud before he had a building." And that was the real ending. Not the policies, not the headlines, but the truth that someone raised to be invisible chose to become undeniable. Inside the center, they hung a plaque near the entrance. It didn't list donors or names of officials, just one quote. "They tried to bury us. They didn't know we were seeds." And below that, a space, left blank, for future names. Because this wasn't just Darnell's story anymore. It was a blueprint for every kid told they're too much, for every driver pulled over before they're greeted, for every mother asked questions meant to shame her son. You ever wonder what would happen if the next generation didn't have to fight for dignity, but simply inherited it? That's what legacy is. Not power, protection, and not just for one man, for all who come next. So tell me truthfully. What would your legacy look like if no one could take your voice from you? And who would you speak for if you weren't afraid? This may be the end of Darnell's story, but maybe it's the beginning of yours.